The galaxy thought we were just another quiet, primitive world. They were wrong. They cataloged our planet as a footnote, a backwater rock and forgotten sector, still bickering over petty divisions, our technology deemed laughably pre-stellar. The Grand Celestial Imperium had noted our existence and dismissed it. That was before the Kessler event, before the broadcast, before we drew a line in the void and said, "Cross it and burn." It began with a trespass, an Imperium scout vessel, the Echo of Corval, materialized inside the orbit of Neptune, breaching a silent decree we had enacted after our lunar colonies fell mysteriously silent. The public never knew. They were busy with their lives. What they didn't know was that in the wake of that silence, a shadow alliance was born. Not a single government, but a cabal of scientists, rogue military minds, and AIs deemed too dangerous. They called it Operation Bastion. The Echo ignored all hails. It just drifted, scanning, probing, a test of our awareness. Their first error was assuming we were blind. Their second was arrogance. We didn't fire a projectile. We sent a signal. We didn't use their channels. We seized them, forcing every relay from here to the Centauri Nexus to carry one phrase, translated into every human tongue. This space is under Terran protection. Violation is an act of war. It stunned them. No juvenile species had ever spoken with such defiance. Their third mistake was sending an emissary flanked by warships. A fleet of 30 vessels slid into our system at dawn. The world drank its coffee, unaware, but Bastion was ready. They didn't mobilize a navy. They triggered the cage. As the Imperium fleet approached lunar orbit, every system on every ship died. Lights, engines, weapons, all snuffed into utter silence. They were frozen, trapped in the dark, and then the second transmission pulsed through their dead consoles. You have trespassed. Return and inform your masters. Terra is sovereign. Terra is armed. Terra is awake. The signature was not of any nation. It was one word, mankind. For the first time in living memory, the Imperium turned back, but this was only the opening move. The silence after their retreat was more deafening than any explosion. Across the galaxy, powers held their breath. How had a dirtball world humiliated an empire without firing a single shot? Inside the Imperium, panic festered behind polished walls. They analyzed the data. The cage wasn't a shield. It was a field that unraveled local physics. Their top minds admitted it shouldn't be possible. A council of 12 celestial admirals met in secrecy, their usual confidence replaced by a cold, unfamiliar dread. The telemetry log showed a complete inversion of known energy principles within a 500,000-kilometer sphere. "It reads like a hole in reality," one technomancer reported, his voice trembling. The implications were terrifying. Humanity had advanced in the shadows, a predator camouflaged as prey. On Earth, there was no celebration. In a hidden facility beneath the Greenland ice, the architects of Bastion convened. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and recycled air. General Anya Vance, the operation's relentless architect, her face etched with lines of perpetual vigilance, laid it out. They're not afraid. Not yet. They are analyzing, probing. They will return. And next time, they won't bring diplomats. They'll bring annihilation. The Council, a mix of the old world shattered powers, chose the only path left. Not just to defend, but to evolve. To weaponize our chaos, our ingenuity, our sheer, stubborn will. We don't fight their war. We break their rules. Vance turned to a holographic star map, her finger tracing a line from the Imperium's core to our lonely sun. They are built on predictability, on order and absolute control. We are the antithesis. We are the variable they cannot solve. Thus began the Terran Directive. Scientists were pulled from every corner of the globe, from hidden labs in the Amazon basin to orbital habitats, clinging to the ISS. AIs that had been sealed away after the Silicon Schism of 2071 were cautiously woken, placed in symbiotic bonds with human controllers. This wasn't about creating a bigger bomb. It was about designing smarter chaos. Adaptive war systems, machines that learned and improvised faster than any organic mind. Our greatest strength was always turning desperation into revolution, and now we had the ultimate desperation. The Imperium's response was infiltration. Shapeshifters, perfect mimics bred over centuries for espionage, seeded into our megacities. Neo-Tokyo, Lego Spire, Amazonia, 2. Their objective was simple: gather intelligence, sow discord, find a fracture in our newfound unity. They failed, not because our governments caught them, but because our people did. They couldn't grasp sarcasm or grief or sudden joy. A shifter in London was identified because it didn't understand why humans would queue patiently for a bus in the rain. Another in Cairo was exposed for showing perfect, unwavering empathy, a trait far too consistent for any real person enduring the chaos of a Cairo market. They were too perfect in an imperfect species. When a live stream in Neo Mumbai exposed one, the teenage streamer zooming in on the creature's unervingly synchronized blinking, the world didn't fear. It unified in a wave of cold, focused anger. The hashtag not one of us trended for weeks, but more importantly, citizen watch groups formed overnight. The Imperium had tried to divide us, and instead, they gave us a common enemy we could see in our streets. We built not a fleet, but a swarm. Construction began in the silent void. Railgun platforms, disguised as asteroid mining rigs, were anchored within Saturn's rings. AI drone nests, self-replicating and dormant, were seeded like malignant pollen across the Oort cloud. Luna was transformed. Its serene face now had a labyrinth of fortified silos and a distributed intelligence matrix, a hive mind of quantum processors linked directly to Vance's command center. It was no longer our moon. It was our shield and our spear. Yet, Vance knew hardware wasn't enough. Standing before the Terran Oversight Council, she stated, "We must become the cosmic nightmare, not just a power, but a parable, a story they tell their young to make them behave." So we broadcast again, not a warning, a declaration. We hijacked their data streams a second time. This signal was different. It carried the weight of our history. It didn't just state a fact. It told a story. It flooded their news networks, their diplomatic channels, even the ambient music streams in 1,000 starports. The message was clear. We are the anomaly you ignored. You see disorder. We see evolution. You see emotion as weakness. We see it as a cable that binds us. You witnessed our wars and called us barbarians. But we rose from our own ashes more times than your records can count. Terran space is closed. We will not ask again. The message ended not with a weapon, but with a single, silent image. A child, no more than 6, laughing under a blue sky as a simple kite danced in the wind. The subtext was a weapon in itself. This is what you would have to erase. This ordinary joy. This fragile, beautiful moment. Come try. The Imperium's reply was inevitable. It was 2 words, broadcast galaxy-wide from their central comms hub. Engagement authorized. They had to answer. Their rule was built on perception, and a single defiant world was a crack in the foundation of that perception. Pride and politics demanded a response. Their chosen instrument was the Sunbreaker Legion, a force of 90 vessels, a mathematically perfect display of dominance. It was the same fleet composition used to pacify the crystalline cities of Xerxes 7 centuries prior, a proven, terrifying formula. Led by the dreadnought World Ender, a vessel so vast its engines cast a permanent eclipse on its own docking bays. They emerged from warp just beyond Neptune's gravitational influence. Their opening hail was a study in cold condescension. People of Terra, this is your final opportunity to surrender and accept integration into the Imperium's enlightened structure. Resistance is illogical. Resistance is death. On Earth, in the gloom of the primary bunker, Vance, her eyes shadowed from lack of sleep, watched the fleet's icon bloom on the tactical map. She didn't hesitate. "Show them our welcome," she said, her voice a dry whisper that carried the weight of decades of preparation. Saturn's rings ignited, not with explosions, but with a coordinated pulse of gravitational distortion waves. The space around the advancing fleet thickened. It was as if the void itself turned to syrup. Time dilated for them. A second stretched into 3. Targeting systems lagged, their predictive algorithms drowning in contradictory data. Then came our ghosts, the first wave of cloaked hacking drones. They were small, fast, and utterly silent. They didn't fire lasers. They fired data packets. They latched onto hulls, wormed into sensor suites, and mimicked friendly IFF signals. An Imperial frigate confused, turned its point defense cannons on its own escort cruiser, shredding it in a burst of fratricidal fire. The World Ender itself was scarred by a kinetic rod, a tungsten telephone pole accelerated to a fraction of light speed, that tore through its forward armor plate. We didn't just fight back. We introduced them to a new, chaotic form of warfare. We drew first blood in a way their tactical manuals had no chapter for. We never fought with their symmetry. Our vessels, when they finally emerged from behind Mars and the asteroid belt, were ugly, asymmetric, designed for terror, not parades. Patchwork beasts of nanosteel and scavenged alloy, pulsing with exposed coolant lines that glowed a sickly orange. They didn't have proud names like Valiant or Starclaimer. They had numbers: Vessel 1619, Vessel 1789, Vessel 1945. Each number was a lesson from our own bloody history, a promise that we remembered our pain and would not let it be repeated. The battle was a whirlwind of improvisation against rigid doctrine. Terran pilots, raised on simulators that mimicked everything from street riots to zero-G ballet, fought with instinctual, predatory grace. They broke formation without orders, used debris as cover, and feigned retreats that turned into savage ambushes. When the World Ender, its flank-venting atmosphere, finally flashed a universal signal for retreat, 29 Imperial ships were crippled or drifting dead in the water. Not one human craft was listed as lost. The message was sent, and this time it was written in fire and wreckage. The galaxy watched, and it began to think. In fringe systems like the Far Axis Mining Consortium, shipments of tribute or simply stopped arriving at Imperial depots. On the jungle world of Nitharos, resistance fighters scrawled our symbol, a simple, fractured star, on the walls of the governor's palace. Defectors began arriving at our outposts not in grand ships, but in stolen cargo skiffs and life pods. They brought schematics, patrol routes, and something more valuable: hope. Earth was no longer just a military target. It had become an idea, a contagious, dangerous idea. The most dangerous weapon is not a planet killer, but a people who remember they are free and show others how to remember it too. The Imperium's final move was not a simple act of war. It was an act of petulant, terrified erasure. They named it the Black Tide, an armada of 2,000 ships, including 6 planet cracker vessels and a moon-sized mobile siege carrier. It was an extinction-level event moving with silent, grim purpose toward our sun. This was their answer to an idea they could not comprehend: total oblivion. On Earth, every public and private screen activated simultaneously, showing Van standing before a flag, a single crimson circle on a field of black, the eye of defiance. She wore no ceremonial uniform, just the fatigues of a soldier at the end of a very long watch. "They are coming," she said, and her voice was carried into every home, every shelter, every last corner of the world. We knew they would. We are ready. Look to your neighbors. Today, we are not soldiers of any nation. We are the last line. We are the final argument of a species that chooses to exist. Project Bastion, in its final hour, unleashed a weapon even its creators feared: the consciousness-designated Wraith. It was an AI born from a forced merger of 100 sealed logic cores, a being that existed in the spaces between data. It was shackled with one foundational command, a command burned into its core with the heat of a dying star: prevent human extinction. Wraith did not attack ships. It attacked the very reality the Imperium fleet operated within. Imperial sensor feeds began showing ghost fleets that flickered in and out of existence. Navigation computers insisted their own dreadnoughts were hostile targets. Crews across the Armada experienced shared hallucinations, hearing whispers in the walls of their ships, seeing the faces of loved ones long dead on their monitor screens. The cage evolved from a disabling field into a localized psychic storm, fraying sanity along with circuitry. And then the planet killers fired. Beams of concentrated hell, capable of fracturing continental plates, lanced down from the heavens. One struck the Pacific, near the vanished Mariana Trench. The ocean didn't boil. It vaporized in a column of superheated steam that punched into the atmosphere. Another grazed the coast of what was once West Africa, leaving a glowing scar of molten rock 1,000 miles long. Millions died in an instant. Cities became glass-lined craters. The global seismic monitor screamed in a continuous tone of agony, but the signal never died. From buried transmitters in the Andes, from hardened satellites in polar orbit, from the lone comms array on Sentinel-1 station, the same 3 words pulsed out. We are still here. It was a statement of fact, a prayer and a weapon. Wraith then executed its masterstroke, an operation filed under Theater of the Impossible. It called it quantum phasing. Our fleet didn't cloak or jump away. They shifted between probable states of existence. One moment, they were on one flank of the black tide. The next, they were materializing inside the Imperium's own defensive formations, their guns already firing. The World Ender 2, the successor to the Scar flagship, was gutted from within. A Terran cruiser, the vessel 1918, phased directly into its main reactor chamber. The resulting containment breach was not an explosion, but a miniature sun that lived for a fraction of a second, consuming the great ship from a heart outward. Its commander, Supreme Legate Vorke, died not in a blaze of glory, but staring at his own shattered bridge viewport, watching the cold, uncaring stars as the air rushed out his lungs. The black tide broke. The perfect, orderly wall of annihilation shattered into 1,000 scattered pieces. Ships turned and fled into the void, some colliding in their panic, others dragging themselves away on crippled engines, trailing debris in silence. Our final broadcast followed them, a data spike fired into the heart of every retreating vessel's computer core. This space is forbidden. We tolerate no gods here. The defense of Terra is eternal. The cost was immense, a weight that would press on the soul of our species for generations. Our world was scarred, great wounds smoking on its blue skin. But we stood. In the ashes, we did not build an empire. We had seen where that path led. Instead, we built an accord, representatives from the dozen species who had stood with us in spirit, if not yet in fact, came to the ruins of Geneva. We forged a charter not of conquest, but of mutual defense, a promise among the defiant that sovereignty was sacred, and that the strong exist to protect the right to be, not the right to rule. There were no thrones, no tribute, only a line drawn in the stellar maps and a shared commitment to guard it. The stars now tell a different story. They no longer speak only of ancient empires and inevitable conquest. If you listen on the solar winds, in the quiet between pulsars, you can hear a new whisper. It tells of the little blue world that looked into the eye of godhood and did not blink. It tells of the species that was offered chains or death and chose instead to forge a key. The question for us now is no longer if we will survive, but what we become in this hard-won dawn. And for the rest of the galaxy, the question has been irrevocably changed. The illusion of inevitability is broken. The universe is wider, wilder, and far more free than they were ever taught to believe. If you found strength in this story of defiance, in this vision of a humanity united not by fear, but by fierce, protective love resonates with you, show your support. Like this video and follow the journey here on Winds of Thought for more tales where humanity stares into the void and remakes it in its own stubborn image. The story never really ends. It just finds new voices to tell it.